Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 175, August the 27th, 2017. It is Sunday. Beautiful day here today. So hopefully you all are having a wonderful day, and hopefully those of you who are down near Corpus Christi and the surrounding area, hopefully the water's receding and hopefully your property damage is not too great. It looks like we didn't have any major loss of life from that storm. And I was watching as the storm hit that particular night. There was quite a few different live streams, and from a lot of the storm chaser type people. Those are some crazy people. And just watching the live stream video from about 10:30 to about almost midnight the night of the storm was just incredible. Me and my girlfriend were just kind of watching it and checking out the winds and the rain and the thunder and lightning, tornadoes coming down within the storm itself. Just absolutely incredible. 120 sustained winds, gust up to 145, 150. Absolutely amazing. There was no loss of life there, but we're happy to hear that. And at least as far as I know, I haven't heard of any. So that would be good. A lot of property damage though. So we'll just have to see. Could have been a lot worse. It was a bad storm. And I expect the rest of us living up here in the Ohio Valley, I imagine we're going to be getting some rain in the next couple of days. So we could probably use it. It hasn't rained here in about a week and a half, so grass is getting a little bit brown. So yeah, we could use a little bit of rain, but typically for us, August is a really dry month anyway. So anyway, that's what's going on. Let's get right to the news. Like I said yesterday when I did the bio video, there's a lot of things that happened in the last 24, 48 hours. It'll take me 2 videos to cover it all, not to mention what else will break, although it seems to be a pretty quiet day today. So maybe I'll get a break and breaking news and I can get caught up. Okay, so let's go ahead and just tick them off, what I can get through in this video. First up, Antifa on their website now has made an official statement. The Antifa official statement is that we will now be separating ourselves from Black Lives Matter because Antifa members have been assaulted by BLM activists. Just as Dig Cry 2 talked about in his comment, just as I was talking about, 3-4 videos ago, that it's just a matter of time before these two groups turn on each other and it all comes to blows between them, and how much fun it's going to be watching CNN and the liberal media and quite a few Republicans, quite honestly, who have signed on to giving their support to Antifa, trying to get everyone to believe that this is somehow a group that's against fascism. This is not what Antifa is all about, and this just proves that these individuals who came out and made these comments don't know anything about Antifa or any of this stuff. They're not paying attention at all. They live in their own little bubble, listening to the inside the Beltway liberal pundits. They just latched onto it, and they just want to be part of anything that bashes Trump. So they jump on this bandwagon, and like I said, it's going to come back and bite them in the butt. And we can see the early stages of this happening now, as these two groups are now going to be faced off against one another. And it's only going to get worse. It's going to build and build and build. And essentially, when we get to the 2020 primaries, the things that will go on at the DNC convention when they're nominating the corporate Democrat, you're going to see these groups thrown into one another again, and that's when it's really going to get out of hand. Now, whether or not both of these groups will still be active under the same name by then, I don't know, because again, these groups have a tendency to pop up, like Occupy becomes Black Lives Matter or Occupy becomes Antifa. They may change their name, but the same ne'er-do-wells who were a part of Occupy Wall Street will join Antifa. They'll join some other group. They'll join another group. It doesn't matter what their title is. It's the same people. The same people you see in Antifa were the same people who were part of the anti-Wall Street thing, which, I'm opposed to a lot of the shenanigans on Wall Street as well. But these, I don't know that these are so much the truth of the issues with these people. it almost seems like it's just an excuse for them to go out and act up. So we are going to keep watching, and I do believe, as I predicted and as we're now seeing from the official statement on the Antifa website, that these two groups have already decided that they can't live together. How about that? Keep watching. Here's an interesting little tidbit. Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal says that Fusion GPS can be compelled to divulge the Democrat donor that paid for the opposition research. GPS Fusion is using the attorney-client privilege and First Amendment protections, which Mr. Blumenthal says does not apply. And he says it's very simple. The attorney-client privilege is something that occurs between a client and his attorney. But he says in the case of GPS Fusion, working with their Democratic donor and working with Christopher Steele, nowhere in this chain do you have any attorney-client relationship happening. There's no attorney-client going on here. You have a client paying for the opposition research. You have Fusion GPS, which does the research. They're not a lawyer. They're not a legal firm. There's no legal representation going on. They're an opposition research firm. Christopher Steele's not an attorney representing anybody. He's a retired intelligence official who now has a private company with a partner, and they do a similar thing that Fusion GPS does. They do opposition research. There is no attorney-client privilege, no attorney-client relationship happening between any of these three people. So therefore, according to Mr. Blumenthal, a Democrat who sits on that committee, I believe the Judicial Committee, he says that Fusion GPS can be compelled to divulge the Democrat donor because there is no attorney-client privilege. How about that? That's a good one, Mr. Blumenthal. We'll see how far that goes. Now, probably the biggest story breaking in the last 24, 36 hours is the following. And this is going to get a little complicated here. It's going to take me a little time to go through it, but it's well worth it. It appears that the investigative unit of True Pundit, speaking with an official FBI source, is stating the following: that the FBI suspects members of Congress leaked the grand jury indictment to the Awans. Possibly Department of Justice officials are being implicated as well. It appears that FBI agents suspect somebody in Congress tipped off the Awans that they would be indicted and now the criminal cases that once seemingly were isolated to a group of rogue Pakistani IT specialists working for Congress has suddenly gotten much larger and much more troubling. So, basically what they're saying is that the FBI has been, as they've been doing their investigation of the Awans, they're finding that it appears that based on their behavior and their actions in the months leading from the time the investigation began up until the indictment and the arrest of Mr. Awan, the activities of Mr. and Mrs. Awan lead them to believe conclusively that someone was tipping them off that they were about to get in trouble. And so they begin to act accordingly to prepare themselves to liquidate all their assets and leave the country with no intention of returning. Here is the evidence. FBI federal agents have said, preceding his arrest, Imran Awan acted like a man who was recently tipped off that he would be pinched. And it was no coincidence that Awan's wife was whisked out of the country in March after sidestepping the FBI at the Dulles International Airport as she fled to Pakistan. She had cardboard boxes for luggage, and the school didn't even know that she had just taken her kids out that morning. The FBI believes further that someone in the Department of Justice leaked the coming Awan indictment to a member or members of Congress, and they then leaked it to the Awans. Question: What members of Congress had a personal relationship with the Awans? Well, does the name Debbie, what the hell has she done now, Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz, raise any eyebrows at the FBI? I think so. Here's the evidence. The grand jury convened on November 13th, 2016. Within weeks, Awan and his wife started moving money, lots of it, to Pakistan and other places unknown. By the time the Awans were indicted on August 17th, 2017, they had liquidated over $2 million in U.S.-backed assets and properties. And that's just what the FBI knows now. They expect to find much more. $800,000 was liquidated after Awan's arrest, 2 weeks before his indictment. And let's not forget, who was it that got Imran Awan out of jail? Well, it was lawyers associated with the Clintons. Lawyers that have previously represented the Clintons. The $800,000 came from the sale of 2 houses. The buy offers were accepted on the day of his arrest. So what they're saying is that when Awan learned of his indictment, there was about 2 weeks between the time that he learned of his indictment and when he was actually arrested. And in those 2 weeks, he liquidated the sale of 2 houses. And what's referred to as a fire sale, because he let the properties go for much below market value, and his attorneys or his real estate agent's ad changed several times in those 2 weeks, each time putting more and more urgency into the ad, letting potential buyers know that the sale of these 2 particular homes, the seller was highly motivated to sell quick. So in the 2 weeks from the time that he was indicted, and which he probably learned that he was indicted, to the time that he was arrested, he let go of 2 homes well below market value. At the same time, Awan was taking large cash advances on credit cards. Yes, that's right. He was going to get those cash advances, head back to Pakistan. He was never going to pay off those credit card balances. You think they would try to track him down in Pakistan? I don't think so. Federal agents believe that Awan was trying to shield the real estate from prosecutors who could freeze or seize the assets. More disturbing is that Awan's wife was preparing to flee to Pakistan. 2 FBI officials went to arrest her, and they were blocked by the now fired ex-FBI head James Comey and Andrew McCabe. Oh my goodness. You think that'll be in Comey's book? Do you think Comey will talk about that little issue? Do you think that the FBI may want to talk to their former head and find out what he was thinking? Or Mr. McCabe, who's already under 3 criminal investigations, now make it 4. So what they're saying is that the FBI actually went to the airport. They were going to make the arrest of Awan's wife as she was leaving the country, and they were essentially told to stand down. And the order apparently came from the head or heads of the FBI, because they're naming both James Comey and Andrew McCabe, is giving the order to stop their own agents from making the arrest of Mrs. Awan. James Comey and Andrew McCabe are going to have some explaining to do. This is their own agency, but keep in mind, the way this investigation is working is that you have FBI officials, agents, who are working on the service of the DOJ. So this is not an investigation that was launched by the FBI. It's an investigation that was launched by the DOJ, and of course The FBI is the investigative arm of the DOJ. So there's probably some separation here. It has also emerged where it appears that the Awans were being helped out along the way, including intervention by Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz, who vouched for the Federal Credit Union loan to Awan, which is now central to the indictment. Remember, we covered in a video about a week and a half ago that Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz actually did make a phone call and vouched for the Awans to help them get a loan through the congressional, or essentially a federal credit union, which typically makes loans to federal employees, members of Congress, and things like that. Typically, they don't do that for individual contractors who work for the federal government. It's usually actual federal government employees, such as members of Congress or things like that. So that was bending the rules, and now that, of course, is part of the, or as it says here, it is now central to the indictment. It appears that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is in a lot of trouble. More to come on that. Also, the Awans were informed on how to use a loophole to stay under the radar of federal agents in the sale of the two properties, proving the Awans were getting legal and professional guidance from someone. You see, it appears that once you are under indictment, that immediately this triggers a process where they begin to watch to see if you attempt to do any financial transactions. They monitor that, as well as any attempts to liquidate any assets. But somehow the Awans were somehow able to do it anyway by using loopholes that would generally only be known to someone who is an attorney or someone who knows these kind of loopholes. Keep in mind, it was the Clinton attorneys representing the Awans. Who do you think gave the Awans this professional, little-known advice about these secret loopholes on how to avoid having these transactions become known to the federal court and the people who are professionally getting paid to monitor this? They were able to fly under the radar. Here's another question that someone may want to ask as they're doing this investigation, and I'm sure this will eventually be looked into by the FBI, and that is, who was paying these attorneys known to have a close relationship with the Clintons and who have represented the Clintons? Who was paying these high-dollar attorneys to do legal work for the Awans? And was it these attorneys who were giving this advice to their client? Awan was arrested on the exact same day that his last property was closed on. So as you can see, what's happening here, Awan is indicted. He is informed that he has been indicted and that things are coming down on him. He's probably told at that point, you need to go. You need to go now. But he's still got these two properties he needs to unload and move that money. So what does he do? He tells his real estate agent to redo his ads and let people know that he is a highly motivated seller, that the properties have to go now. And in that 2-week period of time, he liquidates these two properties using loopholes given to him by someone, we can assume attorneys. He gets rid of these two properties, and on the very day that the second of those two properties closes is the day he's heading for the airport. So obviously in those 2 weeks, he had to take care of that last minute business, liquidating these two properties. And it's pretty amazing knowing what I know a little bit about real estate, because one of my sisters is a real estate agent. I've had dealings in real estate, and I can tell you that in a 2-week period of time to accept an offer and then to get a closing date within 2 weeks, that is extraordinary. I've never heard that happening before. Normally, once you get you accept a offer by a buyer and you say, yes, okay, I've got your offer, I will accept it, it usually takes at least 30 days before you get a closing date. How are they able to get closing dates on 2 properties in 2 weeks? Less than 2 weeks, really. That probably also needs a little investigation. Awan's wife, Alvy, purchased a Lorton, Virginia home in 2008 for $470,000 from Avalo Mortgage with less than 3% down. The sale price of the home was $400,000 less than the previous sale price of $840,000. Avalo was at the time the residential mortgage arm of Goldman Sachs, which was a generous and longtime personal and campaign benefactor of Hillary Rotten Clinton and the DNC, which was previously chaired by Debbie What the Hell Has She Done Now Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz. Wow. Imagine that. You have a home that sells for approximately 800 grand and the Awans are able to pick that house up 4 years later for 470 grand. $330,000 less than it sold for just 4 years earlier. And they're able to make a 3% down on that. Man, oh man, there's something that's not right about that. I mean, did other houses in that particular community drop by nearly 50% in value? This is an upscale area of Virginia, one of the wealthiest counties in the country, if not the world. Man, there's a lot of strange things going on here. This stuff's not adding up, my friends. Maybe this is why the FBI was clued into this. They certainly have to be looking into that. All you would need to do is go back and look for the past 4 years at the average sale prices of homes in that community and see if how many of the rest of them homes sold for almost 50% less. It almost looks like someone worked a deal here where they manipulated paperwork or manipulated the sale price of the home or did something to bring the value of the home down to where a 3% down payment would be acceptable to achieve the minimum requirement of the mortgage contract. That's what it looks like to me. Holy smoke, man. That means that this thing is a spider web of corruption, and the amount of people involved. My goodness, how do you even untangle a mess like this? So based on all these facts, the legal arm, the investigative arm of True Pundit reached out to Debbie, Do Anything for Hillary Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz, but Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz could not be reached for comment. I imagine not. So, will the FBI be granted permission to investigate Congress for leaks which could implicate the Department of Justice bosses at the FBI? Well, according to the source, speaking with True Pundit, the FBI source, he said that he and his fellow agents at the FBI have their doubts. You see, because this goes into the big boys. This goes into the highest echelon of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and members of Congress. It's the too big to fail crowd. The too big to jail crowd. When it involves these people, oh, no, 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 no. They get a free pass. We'll see if Christopher Wray is going to pursue this or if he is going to be pushed away from this. And how will Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, handle that? Very, very interesting. By the way, there are a lot of people who look at that hairstyle that Debbie Wasserman Schultz has. Some people are interested how you could achieve such a bad hairstyle, which Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz obviously thinks is quite becoming because she refuses to change that hairstyle. Let me help you if you want to achieve the Debbie, what the hell did she do now, Wasserman Schultz haircut. If you want to achieve that hairstyle, here's what you do. You take a shower. Then when you get out of the shower, you do not dry your hair. Leave it wet. And then take some hairspray, lots of it, and spray your wet hair down with hairspray. Then go into the kitchen and grab a metal utensil and walk over to the nearest electrical outlet and stick it in it for as long as you can. And shortly thereafter, you will have achieved the Debbie, what the hell did she do now, Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz hairstyle. You're welcome. Finally, new video evidence now shows the car that smashed into the crowd, killing Heather Heyer, was attacked by Antifa. You can see a guy smash the rear of the car with a lead pipe. Then the car took off into the crowd. Then Antifa began attacking the car en masse after it plowed into the crowd. I will provide the video for you. It's about 1.5 minutes long. You can watch it. Now, this is something that I suspected. I don't know if I mentioned it in the video, but this doesn't clear the individual from killing Heather Heyer or injuring those 19 or so other people. He's still liable for that. But we may have some idea now as to what may have motivated him to do it. And I've thought this, I don't know if I said it on video, but, you know, this is something that needs to be considered based on the situation that happened. Now, I'll provide this video for you, and you should take a look at it, and you will clearly see that that gray Dodge is heading down what appears to be a one-way street, because it's a very narrow street. Doesn't look like there's enough room for 2 lanes. It appears that it's a 1-lane street. There are Antifa people on both sides of the street, and there are counter-protesters just ahead. You can see that he's rolling very slowly down the street. Then a guy comes up with what appears to be a lead pipe, and he smacks the rear of the car right about where the left rear taillight would be. Smacks the rear of the car with this lead pipe, and at that point, the guy driving the car steps on the gas, and he plows into the crowd. At which point, his car is completely overwhelmed with Antifa people who begin beating and banging on the car, breaking all the glass in the car, and beating the hell out of the body of the car. You can clearly see this on the video, which I will provide for you. I am also going to provide for you the entire story that I just recounted for you regarding FBI agents suspecting that members of Congress, possible members of the DOJ, including possibly the FBI director himself, alerted the Awans that they were going to be under criminal indictment and possibly arrested. I will provide that story to you as well. Both links for both the video of the car and the link to the True Pundit story will be in the link provided below the description of this video. I highly encourage you to take a look. So, as we can see, this tangled web is like a spider with many, many tentacles, many legs, many arms reaching out all throughout the bureaucratic establishment in the swamp. Everyone seems to be involved. Certainly, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You have to question why, and we have been questioning why would Debbie Wasserman Schultz put herself into such legal and political jeopardy to try and defend and hang on to Awan, knowing all that we know now. What would motivate her to do that? He must have something on her. Do you think she did this out of the goodness of her heart because she feels sorry for the poor Pakistani IT guy who's getting harassed by the government? I don't think so. Clearly, there's a lot more to be vetted in this particular story, which seems to be growing and growing. Every single day, we seem to learn more and more about the Awans. Whether or not he has talked, and whether or not that's where they learned this, or whether this is through their investigation, I don't know. But clearly, this is beginning to look like this was a much larger criminal conspiracy than what we ever imagined. And whatever Awan has, whatever information he has, it must be pretty damaging for Wasserman, Blabbermouth Schultz, and possibly other Democrats, as well as high-level people in the DOJ, possibly the Attorney General herself, Lynch, possibly James Comey, Andrew McCabe, for them to all be participating in assisting Mr. Awan. At the very same time, their own agencies are the ones doing the investigation. So you have people within the DOJ and the FBI investigating the Awans, while the highest level people of those two organizations are actively working with the Awans against their own agencies, investigators, to protect the Awans. And apparently feeding this information to Debbie Wasserman Schultz because she's obviously was the go-between, the person who had direct communication with Awans. What do the Awans know? What do they have that would prompt these high-level people to put themselves in such legal jeopardy as to want to protect them? What could that possibly be? It's got to be something very damaging. Don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of this deal, but something stinks in Denmark. Something is rotten in Rotterdam. My. TowerGate. Day 175, Sunday, August 27, 2017. The hits just keep on coming. I'll be back tomorrow with the other half of what I couldn't get to. Thank you so much for tuning in. Y'all enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm going to clean the shower. Thank you. I'm out.